Have you ever looked up your day and thought, why am I this exhausted? Nothing blew up, nothing dramatic happened, and yet you're completely depleted. If you're tired of being on all the time, mentally, emotionally, logistically, then this episode's for you because burnout doesn't usually come from one really big thing. It comes from the quiet, invisible ways that we slowly give ourselves away without even realizing it. Hey y'all, it's Courtney. Welcome back to the Life Management System. So, if you're a regular listener here, you can probably hear in my voice that I've got the crud. And sadly, this isn't something that I caught. It's something I did to myself by pushing too hard. And yes, blah, 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 classic example of like the cobbler's kids are not wearing shoes. And I hate that. And I'm being very transparent and visible and honest with you. And I'll say that normally I'm actually quite steadfast about practicing what I preach. I like really do honor the things that I bring to bear here. But despite how hard I grinded the past 2 weeks, I will say proudly, I also still did honor my priorities. Like I worked out religiously, I was very present with my boys. I took time in person to be with my close friends. Like I did the things that I actually really do prioritize because you've heard me say many times, it starts with what you value. You figure that out, you put those first, then you figure out how to spend your time on everything else. I really did do that. But unfortunately, I did a really crappy job at slowing down and not saying yes to too much. So that's actually the spirit behind what inspired this episode. It certainly inspired a giant timeout for myself. I told Richard, my husband, and several of my friends that asked how it went, I was like, I'm not going to do that again. Like, it was a very hard lesson for me. And because I had that hard lesson, now you get to join me in that journey. So let's dig in. So, to start with a little reflection, have you, as well as I have, apparently, have you ever reflected on your day and thought, why the heck am I this tired? Like, yes, I know what led to mine, but there have been many circumstances where nothing catastrophic happened, and yet I was chronically depleted. And I just like, I don't know, nothing was that overwhelmingly dramatically like in my face about it, but yet I felt so tired from always being on. Does that feel familiar to you? Do you experience just like I have this place of like, oh my gosh, all of these mental tabs are open and I'm giving everywhere, but it never seems to be enough? Or perhaps you've even felt some of this low grade guilt that you're just like you're given all that you have to give, and yet it just never feels like it's enough. So I want to I want to go slow to go fast. I'm going to take a step back up and let me set the stage for this entire conversation beyond just me being sick. So, I was actually being interviewed just yesterday on another podcast, and the host of it asked me whether there was any specific moment or turning point where I realized something had to change for myself or my family. And I shared with her that I find out that with most people, burnout sneaks up on you. It's not something that like uncharacteristically happens where it triggers it and you look back and you're like, like duh. No, it's something that slowly creeps up and then all of a sudden you realize how misaligned what you're doing is with the type of life that you want to live. So let me paint the picture for years, like multiple years, let's call it 4 or 5 years, I did not sleep well at all. I would take hours to fall asleep at night. I would wake up in the middle of the night at like 3, 4 o'clock, and I would never go back to sleep. So I was averaging, honestly, like 3 to 4 nights of sleep, and I really need 8.5. So that should have been a trigger to me, but it was not. Like I blamed it on everything else. I had multiple kids, multiple pregnancies. Like my body needed time to adjust to the new schedule. Like I don't know. There were a lot of excuses, but they were excuses. So I struggled to sleep. I was working 80 hours a week. I had a lot of great friends at work. I did work that I loved. I had a very mentally abusive boss, but that's a whole other story. But like it was stressful. And I recognize that in the moment. I guess I just under recognized how much. So then there was this one specific week where that is really a turning point for me. I could not hold my 7-month-old who had RSV because I was too busy, like too busy with work, too wrapped up in what it was, like my pride, my promises, all this other stuff, that I could not hold this really precious, tiny 7-month-old who was just so pathetically needed to be with his mom. But yet, what's really sad when I say that out loud is that none of that stuff triggered for me that I had a problem. So, to continue the conversation, um, I was spending a lot of time working on this proposal that we ended up not winning. And then when we lost, my senior colleagues that I reported to on this proposal threw me under the bus and was like, "Nope, nope, it's her problem." They did not own any of it. Naturally, both of them were guys, and they were both single guys. Neither of them had kids, neither of them had girlfriends or boyfriends. They were truly doing their thing. And also, by the way, like far more qualified on this type of work. I had never done that type of service. I had never worked in that industry, so I was very much over my head. And they very unfairly not threw me under the bus because they dropped things in my lap, like things that they were supposed to own that 2 days before it was due were like, actually, I didn't do any of it. Good luck. So I mean, it was crappy. Also, that was not enough to trigger for me. Then after that was all said and done, my boss essentially told me I wasn't enough. And I remember like I told him, I'm sorry, I gave everything I could in the past 2 weeks to make this a success. I did not throw my male colleagues under the bus, but I owned my accountability and just said I hate that it didn't happen. I'm sorry, but I worked 80 hours. I felt like there was nothing else I had to give. My boss so ridiculously actually was like, "Well, then I want to see what you did because clearly it wasn't important, like as much as, all the stuff that you say you're doing." So I sent him my time log of everything that I spent that week on, which is also just ridiculous and very untrusting. Then I had to then spend another like 45 minutes to an hour adding up and like documenting everything that I worked on. And he was like, that, that bullet right there. Like, I can't believe you wasted time on HRBS. So I wrote it back. I was like, I'm sorry, excuse me. Consider that my free time. I only work 79 and a half hours. I mean, it was just the whole thing was ridiculous. But none of that, like none of the sleep, none of the hours, none of not getting to hold my baby, not the gaslighting from my male colleagues, not my boss berating me, like none of that still triggered to me. It wasn't until later I met with a colleague at a literal water cooler. We were at his home office. I supported the senior team, so I was sitting. I was facilitating a workshop for them, and then when we were on break, he followed me to the literal water cooler and warned me. He's like, "You have to leave this role. It is going to do you in. You can't win here. This is who he is. And I see you, Courtney." He's like, "I see how much you care. I see how capable you are and how hard you've worked to build this brand. He's gonna take you. I promise that. Like, he's gonna suck all of the life out from you." So it wasn't until I got over all of the emotions of that week and I had someone very close to that leader, like he'd worked with him for at least 10 years at that point, very close to the leader, who pulled me aside and said, "Look, there's a problem. I was being gaslit by these single egotistical men. I like let my family and the thing that I said that I value the most suffer. And I was so in it for so long that I couldn't even recognize the signs of what I was going through." And that's the thing about boundaries. Most boundary issues don't feel like someone's crossing a line. Like what I experienced, that feels like a line when I look back, and yet it wasn't. But also, for most people, like I experienced, you just feel like you're slowly disappearing. And it's really hard to tell in the moment. So there's this misconception that boundaries are about like, no, I need to use the word no better. Need to use the word no louder. And that's just not it. And it doesn't sit with me. Like that's just not my personality. I know that I'm capable And I know that I could say no, but that's just not how I show up. It's not the energy I bring. It's not the softness and approachability I like to engage with. But I can tell you what, I wish I had a little bit more dude energy sometimes. Like, as much as I know that it would be a lot easier to just be like, nope, not doing it. Like, nope, sit back down. I don't. It's just not me. But I would love to channel some of that dude energy. So Richard, very unapologetically, as an example, turns his brain off every night to decompress. We have been together for almost exactly 20 years. And I know that about him. I know he needs downtime every single night. And instead of taking a page from his book, I often find myself getting really jealous or, truthfully, when I'm extra busy, like especially with family stuff, I get a little borderline resentful. But here's the thing about boundaries. Most working moms think I don't have a boundary problem, I'm just busy. Like, I mean, I say that, I have that narrative all the time, despite the fact that I see Richard just as busy and yet being able to protect his time. And yes, would love to offer that boundaries aren't about delivering that hard no or pushing people away. But like I experienced when I burned out 9 years ago, they're also about noticing where you're leaking. And oftentimes we are leaking ourselves. It's not other people and what they're doing to us. There is true accountability and boundaries in ways that we often like to feel victimized. So, true to their name, these invisible leaks are like they're sneaky little suckers, like a little wormy fish. They're sneaky little suckers. So these invisible leaks show up when we're thinking about work when we're actually off the clock. Or maybe they're showing up when we feel guilty about resting or taking time off. Or when we check our email just in case. Or we say, it's fine. And we say that too much when it's honestly not fine. Or maybe it's in the mental rehearsing of explanations over and over. I swear to you guys, I, honest to goodness, have a waterproof notepad in my shower for this very occasion. And I'll link that in the show notes because it is really fantastic. So you like when you let your brain just run, what great ideas you can come up with. But sometimes it is rehearsing those explanations. Like that's a boundary. Or perhaps the leaking for you is in letting expectation of others and what they have of themselves, the standards that they have for themselves or of themselves, spill over into you. So, as an example, I worked for 4 different CEO administrations. I shared company with some really badass women, and I'm just humbled to have shared a room with them. I learned so much. I am who I am because I got to see them do life. But here's the thing, they were all very perfectly polished all the time. And I constantly felt inferior. I constantly felt frumpy. And as much as I want to look good, I never needed to look that level of great. That's their standard. And what happened is I let their standards supersede my standards in ways that I used that as an excuse for years. Like the better part of a decade, I said I could not work out because I always had to look that good. Like I couldn't let that go. So I let their own expectations of themselves spill into me. So that's another form of a leak. So sadly, these leaks tend to happen because we've been so normalized in experiencing them and seeing them and tolerating them because we are constantly accessible to others. Or mentally and emotionally, we don't feel like we have the luxury of turning it off. That's a women problem more than anything. And our time leaks because our calendar is reflecting other people's priorities, not ourselves. And rationally, we often also feel like pit cushions because it's so much easier to go with the flow, or we just accept being the go-to because we are being victimized. We are putting on the victim hat instead of being accountable because training someone else to be effective is hard. Training somebody else to understand what to do and to level up, that's hard. Reinforcing someone else to be accountable, that's even harder. But all of those are forms of postponing ourselves, like not actually honoring us and what we prioritize. But yet, somehow, that kind of thing happens indefinitely. But, friend, hear this, that isn't a personal flaw. It's conditioning. Like, truly, society expects women to prove ourselves when men, as an example, are granted the same level of permissions, not because they proved themselves, but because they demonstrated potential. And that's BS. And then societal norms also haven't really shifted. So if you think back to multiple generations ago, 2 generations ago, women at that time largely took on full-time caregiving responsibilities, but yet they do things like kick the kids out of the house and they'd go, the kids would run around outside until the street lights came on and then the kids would come back home. They weren't emotionally or physically obligated to their kids 24/7. Then that next generation, really leaned in and said, I want to be available for my kids. Like, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be hip to hip with them. I'm going to be emotionally available. I am going to be physically present. But they did that and they were caregivers. Like that was their job. But somehow for most of us tuning in and listening and talking right now, we have taken that parenting approach, like that always on, always available for our kids parenting approach, but then we've layered in this other major variable about working outside the home for an income. I mean, I'm a believer that all women work. So anybody listening to this, that has kids, if you don't associate with being a working mom, I don't care if you work for an income or not, you are a working mom. I'm here to tell you that. But here's the other problem with that equation. Society hasn't caught up. Our partners are often still, they're either peers or often are not the breadwinners of the family. Women are doing really great, but yet we still continue to shoulder the same domestic workload and mental load and everything in between. So what's happened is we have had these standards of what's expected of us, how we're expected to show up. And we often build brands around like, I'm high functioning, I'm capable, because that's what we do. We are badasses. That's what we do. But unfortunately, what happens in the meantime is that becomes synonymous with our identity. And yeah, we're proud of that. Like, I like that people come to me and they know that I'm reliable and they know I'm going to kick ass. Very proud of that. But also, I could not for the longest time figure out how to turn down the volume because I essentially had trained people to rely on me. And I'm sure that many of you are saying, like, that sounds familiar. So it's no wonder we then become the person who feels like we always have to say yes to others because it's safer to say yes to them than disappoint them because we're less scared about disappointing ourselves or being misaligned ourselves. So does that at all sound familiar to you? I hope I'm not talking to myself here. Like I expect based on the conversations I've had with so many of you that there's something in that that resonates. But here's the thing. Boundaries are impossible to correct and protect until we can name them. Awareness is the first step in protecting our leaking energy. And then therefore being able to change our behaviors because knowing and being able to name what needs to change is going to trigger insights for us faster than learning any new rule or any new strategy possibly could. It also helps ensure that we're plugging the right holes in the right places instead of burning them out, trying to like whack-a-mole fix the wrong leaks. So I created a boundary self check quiz because so many women that I speak with keep saying things like, I know I'm chronically tired and I can't figure out why. Like they blame work, they blame the kids, they blame the things on their plate, but it doesn't have to look like that. So this quiz will give you a place to start and it can help you not only figure out where you're leaking, it can help you do that quickly. It can help you do so in a non-judgmental way because it's just you and this quick quiz and it can give you the clarification of knowing which whack-a-mole is coming up next for you. So I worked at one point in time with a CEO that for 3 consecutive performance reviews in a row, told me I needed to learn how to turn down the volume or burnout. By the way, it was the same CEO that's telling me, like, Courtney, turn down the volume 3 performance years in a row, is the same CEO that bragged about not taking his computer on vacation. And part of that's like, yeah, well, shit rolls downstream. Like, I was there to catch it, but that wasn't really it. I mean, I did that to myself. I played victim by giving people access to me when I needed to protect myself. I needed to protect the likelihood of me burning out. So the irony is that that conversation, those 3 performance reviews I referenced, was 5 years after I hit this notable burnout that I talked about at the beginning of this episode. So it tells you how crappy we are as women about suppressing the noise and the pressure and the desire that we have to deliver for others and care for others as opposed to caring for ourselves. So it took my entire department being eliminated and me losing my job to really get that point. And that's why I started this business, because I help clients just like you make sure that you aren't giving everything away to others and that you have things to still offer yourself as opposed to having nothing left in the tank for you. But for now, I invite you to get started with that quiz. I'm going to link that in the show notes. I promise it's quick and easy. I mean, we're talking 3 minutes. So that way you can better understand where your biggest opportunities are, where you can start plugging leaks, and just know that that awareness is the first step to making your journey more sustainable because you deserve to enjoy it too. Okay, friends, you can access the quiz in the show notes, but in the meantime, I'm here to remind you that you're doing a great job. You've got this, mama. If this conversation hit close to home, I want you to listen to episode 67 next, why burnout sneaks up on high performers and what it's really telling you. In that episode, I break down why capable, responsible women are often the last to realize that they're burning out and how burnout is actually information, not failure. It's the missing context that's going to help you stop blaming yourself and start making changes that are actually sustainable.